welcome to Roll for Adventure. I'm Bonnie.
I'm Trent.
And I'm Bren.
And today we'll be looking at Toon, a game where you play as a cartoon character in a world where physics is just a funny word and nobody ever dies.
Toon is a light-hearted game that usually is played with 3 or 4 players and a GM, who is referred to as the animator. Though technically a GURPS game, don't expect a lot of statistics and number crunching.
Character creation is really easy, and you can be ready to play in just a few minutes.
First, you have to select what species you'd like your character to be. Since this is a cartoon world, you can be anything from an ant to a hippo or even a toaster. If you're stuck, you can let the dice decide with the handy table in the book.
After that, you need to pick your attributes. So there's 4 of them: muscle, zip, smarts, and chutzpah. What you need to do here is roll a 6-sided die for each one. You also need to roll a die to see how much health you have.
Now is when you start fleshing out your character by picking their beliefs and goals. Beliefs can be as simple as, I hate elephants, or I'm the greatest. They can also be a bit more complex, like a job should be done well, or not at all.
Goals work the same way. You could have a goal of find and eat carrots, or you could really mix things up and prevent everyone else from achieving their goals. The most important thing is that you pick beliefs and goals that are likely to get your character into trouble. This is a cartoon after all.
If you play to your beliefs and goals, especially if they make things crazier, the animator is likely to award you plot points that you can use to level up after the game.
The last thing you'll need to do before the game can start is pick 8 possessions for your character. 4 of these will be normal things like rope, matches, or an umbrella. The other 4 can be pretty much anything you can think of.
Yeah, you could have an inflatable anvil, or a rocket-powered skateboard, or even a Martian ray gun. The crazier the better. Are you sensing a theme here?
Once you're done with possessions, you're ready to go. One thing that might catch veteran roleplayers off guard is that play in a Toon game is designed to go fast. In most other games, you're encouraged to plan and strategize to keep your character alive against all odds. But in Toon, you can't die, and you're supposed to make snap decisions at every turn. The less thought put into it, the better.
If your character gets reduced to 0 health, they fall down. It's a cartoon, so terrible things happen to your characters all the time, and it would be a bit unfair if you were out for good. So the game instead makes you wait for 3 minutes for you to rejoin the action. Good as new. 3 minutes doesn't seem that long, but it can be pretty tense waiting for you to get back into the action.
Another thing that you may find unusual is that it is often a good thing to fail your rolls in Toon. For example, your character may have been thrown out of a plane by the bad guy. In true cartoon style, you decide to use an umbrella as a parachute. The animator would ask you to roll a smarts. If you fail the roll, your character is too stupid to realize that you can't use an umbrella as a parachute. So it works perfectly. If you succeeded in the smarts roll, well, you're going to make a really big hole in the ground.
The beauty of Toon is that absolutely anything can happen, no matter how crazy or illogical. As long as a player can justify something within the world, it works. I remember in a game, one of our players had a bus stop as one of his possessions, and we needed to get to deepest, darkest Africa. So he put his bus stop on the street, and sure enough, along comes a bus to Africa.
As long as you have players who are willing to really embrace the silliness of the world and dial it up to 11, Toon is a fantastic game that will generate stories you'll be telling your role-playing friends for years to come.
It can take a while for some people to get into the swing of things. So the animator really needs to try and get the players engaged in the game. Silly accents and overacting are highly recommended.
There's several adventures in the core Toon book that contain everything you need to get a game going. And once you get a bit more familiar with the game, there's a few more advanced rules that you can use when creating characters.
The most interesting of these are shticks. Shticks are crazy abilities that your character can have, like super speed or hypnosis. But you can also have shticks like bag of many things, which allows your character to pull almost anything out of it.
At first glance, these can seem a bit overpowered, but all shticks have more than a 50% chance to fail when they're used. This allows the animator and the other players to come up with hilarious consequences for the ability or device going wrong.
Shticks can really add a lot to the game, but like everything else in Toon, they really need players who are willing to use them in crazy and inventive ways.
Well, that's a quick breakdown of the core mechanics of Toon. After the break, we'll go into the strengths and weaknesses of the game and give you our overall impressions. Stick around, we'll be right back. Welcome back to Roll for Adventure. We're having a look at the game Toon. So guys, we've had a look at the core mechanics of the game, but how would you sum up the overall feel of Toon?
Silly. You play silly characters in a silly world doing silly things. And it all sort of gels together and it makes a really fun game.
Yeah, it really captures that feeling of the Saturday morning cartoons, and you're getting a chance to live out these episodes with your friends.
I found Toon really easy to come into as a new player. It's not the most complex system out there. It's really nice and straightforward. You roll 2d6 and you're hoping to get under a certain skill.
I really enjoyed our first game. I didn't read any of the source materials before we started and just rocked up and thought, okay, we're going to play Toon. And I really enjoyed that in that you've got the character generation as part of your first segment that you guys do together. And just you can really pick up these rules and just run with this game, which is great.
It's straightforward and it's brilliant for new players. It's not complex. There's not a whole lot that you need to roll and keep track of.
Yeah, the mechanics of this game is really simple and easy for new players to get started with, which I really enjoy. You don't have a whole set of polyhedral dice, you just have some 2d6, so just standard playing dice, which people are really familiar with. So you can just say, okay, there we go, start your character, and off you go.
In this game, there's not really a set initiative order. You can jump in whenever you want. I found that quite fun and freeing because I could do anything as soon as I thought of it. But sometimes quieter characters can not have a lot to do.
Yeah, we did end up just sort of going around the table and taking one turn each, but it's not really how the game's meant to work. It's really just to jump in there and have a go.
I think a good house rule for this game would be to have 2 different tokens that you could have. So you have one token for when it's your turn and you want to do something, and 1 token for when you want to react. And that sort of limits what's going on. And so you do have an opportunity to react, but you're not reacting to everything, and it speeds the game up quite a lot.
I found when we were playing in our game, it really helped if we'd at least watched the same cartoons or knew about them, because we had one guy who hadn't, so he felt a bit left behind in that he didn't know what we were going on about and he couldn't join in the same jokes.
Yeah, you've got to have the genre tropes, or if you've grown up on Looney Tunes or
or Hanna Barbera.
Yeah, it's you really get that feel for that particular cartoon style versus some of the newer cartoons, for example.
Oh, but you could totally play this game with Adventure Time or something more modern.
So something you've got to be a bit wary of is you really need proactive players. You really need players that are going to do things and go places and really drive the story forward.
Yeah, we saw that with Monster Hearts, in that if you're a quiet player, you can be left behind. You really need to take charge and really own your own destiny for your character.
Unless, of course, you've got an amazing GM who pulls out those quiet characters and goes, Sally, you haven't done anything for a little while. What's your character doing?
I find there's really 2 strong sorts of players coming into this game. Yep. It's players that really know each other really well and sort of, I throw you an idea, you pass it back, and then we run with it. But also newbies sort of have this tendency to sort of give you unexpected things because they aren't restrained by, oh, you can only do this in a role-playing game. They're like, well, I want to do a thing, and everyone's sort of like, oh, that's such a fantastic idea.
Yeah, there's that unlimited possibilities with all these characters. So do you think this would run well as a convention game?
Yeah, I think with the random character generation and the really quick, simple way that you put your character together, I think it would be a great convention game.
What I really enjoy about this game is that the character can't die, and this is a really good safety net for new players. You don't have that, oh my God, if I stuff up, that's it, I'm out of the game. 3 minutes later, you're back in, good to go.
I really like that old players sort of get a bit shocked by it, and they're like, you mean I can do this, and the worst possible thing that can happen is I'm out of the game for 3 minutes? Watch their eyes light up and then go for it.
Yeah, you can totally push the barriers. You can do anything and you don't have to wait and go, oh, but what might happen?
And I like that creativity that people can bring. You know, those quiet players that we're talking about can really come up with some great ideas around the table.
I love Toon in that it doesn't feel so simple that I'm just role-playing a character without any guidelines. It does have complexity, but it's not as complex as other games in that you working out which die you've got to roll and then working out what skill to add. It's just 2d6 and you're just rolling under, so it's quite straightforward in that sense.
Yeah, I like how the abilities and the skills that you have are just really straightforward. There's no explanations, you know, you're not flicking between textbooks, you know, to decide what attributes that they really are specifically. They are just as they appear, you know, how you read them.
Yeah, I mean, I once was like, I'm going to shoot this cannon. What skill do I use? Oh, there's a skill. Shoot guns. That was my skill.
I love that in this game the possessions are so unique and you get to make them up. Like, you can have whatever you want. You've got 4 basic things. They're easy to come up with, so like rope, or it depends on your character. Like, I was a little boy, so of course I had, you know, chewing gum and a slingshot.
Yeah, I found that the 4 anythings could really actually trip me up a bit. I'm like, oh, I've got so much possibility. Like, what do I choose? It really tripped me up the first time I did it.
Yeah, you really find the veteran RPG is really struggling with this part of the character generation.
I could have anything.
I could have anything, but what might I need for this adventure?
Exactly.
It's a sticking point for the veterans, but I find that the new players just pick anything and run with it.
So if you're gonna actually intend to play this game long term, then the GM really needs to stay on top of the plot points and making sure the players are actively playing towards the beliefs and goals and that the GM knows what they are. Otherwise, you're not going to advance your character.
I think a good idea is, if you're going to plan to play this long term, just get some index cards and fold them into a tent and write your goal and belief on that index card so everyone at the table can see what you're aiming for.
Especially if you want your beliefs and goals to create conflict and create something going on between the other players. So if they can see that, they're more likely to bring it up.
Yeah, I find that the goals and beliefs were a bit of a sticking point when we were creating our characters. You know, this is going to be an integral part of your character and is not going to change over time. So you really want to pick something that's going to be interesting and fun to play.
That said, I think GMs should give some leeway when it comes to changing these. If you're playing a game and your goal is, I want to get to the ocean, and the game only ever occurs in the desert, then that's not a goal that's going to come up. So you really want something that's going to come up in game. So have a talk to your GM and see if they can sort out something that'll be fun and interesting to play.
Yeah. Or use some of your goals and beliefs in the game as well. So adding that flavour in, even for a prescribed adventure, to throw in some of those elements to continue the game.
Keep it random. So when we first played this, we played with 7 players, and that was a little bit too many. And then we played it with 5, which felt a lot better, but it was still kind of slow. You're still waiting for your turn to come around. I feel it would be best with 3 to 4 players. Then you're actually getting a chance to do what you want, and because of the free form, jump in and do whatever, it works better with less players.
Yeah, you definitely enjoy more game time, I guess, with the smaller player set. But you know, the large numbers, anything could happen, and there was a lot of random elements coming into the game, which was good to see.
When we played this, we found that we were using dodge a bit too much. It says that you can defend against someone's attack in the game. So if I'm throwing my hammer at you, you might just dodge out of the way. But it got overused and a bit boring. So in our next game, we suggested, you know what, let's force ourselves not to use dodge and come up with more creative ways of getting back at the other character.
Yeah, so looking through your other skill sets, how else can I avoid this attack against me? Or how could I counterattack? Or I could even just say, yes, and that happens, and moving on with the rest of the scene. What else can I do
it's not like you're going to die.
Yeah, like how can I plot my revenge or retaliate later without interrupting the flow of the game?
Yeah. When I first made my character, for my very first game, I randomly rolled my stats, which means I'm rolling randomly my skills, my attributes, and seeing what I get. And that was a lot of fun. I liked how I ended up with something unexpected. But if you had a specific character in mind, like you wanted to play Speedy Gonzalez or something, you want to be fast. And if you randomize that, you're not necessarily gonna be. One of the options though is that you can roll your dice and then select which skill to put that in. And that's what we did the second time. It was a lot more fun.
As an alternative, there is a 14-point buy system where you can buy attributes point by point, and it makes it a little bit more controlled.
I find both methods really, they can work well as well. You can have that randomness of your character and really ham it up and just have that unexpected parts to your character. But like you said, yeah, if you're going for something really specific, you do need that control when you're creating the characters. So always speak to your GM.
Yeah. One of the great things about Toon is that I feel it's great for kids. It's a straightforward, simple game, and it's cartoons. What kids don't want to play cartoons?
Yeah, I like this game in that the dice rolls are simple. Like, I know a lot of kids that would be able to add two numbers on the D6 together to give you your score. And there's not more complicated maths than that. So I really feel like it's kid friendly.
Yeah, I feel like this is a game that I can grab my nephews and say, okay, we're going to play a game. I don't have to call it role playing or whatever. And it's a game of make believe where you pretend to be one of your favorite characters in a cartoon.
Yeah.
And I think cartoons are one of those things that every person's had as part of their childhood. And you can really connect with what's going on because of that childhood nature.
Yeah, it calls to the child in all of us.
I mean, you can play this game whether you've seen Hanna Barbera or Warner Brothers, or even the modern ones like SpongeBob and My Little Pony.
Well, aside from everything else, this game is just a lot of fun to play. It's silly.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing stopping you. Go big. I mean, you're out for 3 minutes if something goes wrong, and that's the worst thing that can happen. So it's just keep pushing forward and keep having fun.
Yeah, it's a lot of improv, it's a lot of just yes and it's just a silly adventure that you have fun, a few laughs, and it's an enjoyable evening.
Well, after the break, we'll be speaking with the designer of Toon. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Roll for Adventure. Today we're looking at Toon. We're lucky enough to be joined by Greg Costikyan, the designer of Toon, all the way from Texas. Welcome to the show, Greg.
Thank you.
So what inspired you to create Toon?
Okay, so back in the late 80s, I was at Origins and talking with Jeff D and some other people, state of the industry at the time, and we all kind of agreed that all of the obvious genres had been done, that there were games for them, and Jeff D said, except for Saturday morning cartoons, and we all kind of laughed at that and said, oh, well, yeah, clearly there was no way of doing that. And so I went home and, I don't know, a couple of weeks later, I was thinking about it and I said, well, why couldn't you do that? So I wrote it up originally not as a standalone role-playing game, but just as an article for Space Gamer magazine, and sent it off to Steve Jackson, and he accepted it. And then I heard nothing about it for several months, and eventually got a call from Warren Spector, who had joined the Steve Jackson Games staff and had found my article in the files. And Warren actually had a degree in film studies, and his thesis had been in Warner Brothers cartoons. He was really excited by it, and he said that he thought I really had captured the spirit of Warner Brothers cartoons, and he wanted to turn this little article of mine into a full-fledged game. And I, of course, said yes, because I was certainly likely to be paid more for a full-fledged game than I would for an article for Space Gamer magazine. And yeah, so Warren spent a lot of work on it, and the final product is at least as much his doing as mine. And it was published and was modestly successful. It was fine.
Yeah, so what were your main design goals?
So my basic approach to role-playing game design is always to try to tailor a system that captures the spirit of whatever it is that I'm working on. In this case, I wanted to have kind of cartoon physics and a sense of wild improvisation on the part of players. And therefore, I kind of tried to have a minimalist system in terms of rules, but reward that kind of gameplay. Yeah.
How would you sum up Toon for someone new to role-playing?
It's the role-playing game of the Saturday morning cartoons. You're playing cartoon rabbits and so forth. So and Warner Brothers is more than Disney or something. It's really the kind of basis there.
Toon really seems like a great game to introduce kids to role-playing. Is that something that you were aiming for?
Yeah, not specifically, and While I think that's true, I also think it's not an easy game to games master. So while you could probably play it with younger people, you would still need to have a fairly experienced games master to make that work.
Now, Greg, once you get it to above 4 or 5 players, the game can get a bit unwieldy. So was a small party size important in the design for you?
It's not something that had occurred to me at the time, really. But when I play tested it, I think we never had a group larger than 6. So, yeah.
Are there any aspects of the game that you think could work better?
If I were doing the game today, I probably would go even more systems light. But other than that, I think it works pretty well.
If you could go back and change anything about Toon, what would you change?
I don't know. I haven't really looked at the game from a design lens for many years. So, yeah.
So if you were a Toon character, what crazy possession would you have?
That's an interesting question. Yeah, probably something to change an object into something completely random. No real control over it, but just.
And finally, Greg, what are you working on now?
Okay, so I actually started working here at Boss Fight Entertainment just recently, and I'm currently working on a free-to-play mid-core mobile game, kind of mythologically themed, combat-oriented. It's obviously not announced yet, so I can't really say more than that. And I actually have a game that's currently being developed by Loot Drop, which is John and Brendan Romero's company, which is also a free-to-play mid-core game, but that one based on a science fiction license.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Greg. We really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure.
Well, that's about it for this week. All that's left is to give our final ratings. To keep with our theme, we use a dice rating system on Roll for Adventure, ranging from a D4 to a D20. Trent, what are you going to give Toon?
I really like it. I like the simpleness of it, and I find it very simple to GM. And I really like that. I really like systems that are fun to GM as well as fun to play. And it's so simple and straightforward. You can play just about anything, like Tom and Jerry, My Little Pony, or SpongeBob. So I'm going to give it a D12.
Brent?
Yeah, look, I liked that it really mixed up our group. You know, it was a change of pace from what we normally play, so, you know, it has that variance in it. However, it's just not that serious of a game, and I just don't find myself coming back to that this often, so I'll be giving it a D8.
Okay. I really loved Toon. I feel like it's got a lot of potential and flexibility in it. You could run some other interesting cartoon shows in it. But again, it's not something I'm going to come back to and play that often, so I'm giving it a D10. You can find out more about Toon on our website, rollforadventure.com.au. While you're there, you can find the video of this week's show as well as exclusive web clips. Next episode, we have a go at creating history in Microscope. See you then.